War II, everybody thinks it started on December the 7th, 1941, but it really didn't. It started in the 1920s after World War I. Hitler was coming up the line, the Japanese were coming up in the line. In 1932, the Japanese started the invasions up through the northwest, through Korea, Manchuria, down the east coast of China, killing some 5 to 7 million Chinese civilians in doing so. We knew it was coming. In 1940, we were based in Long Beach, and we went on a fleet maneuvers just before April 1st, 1940, around Honolulu, which was then the territory of Hawaii. Remember, it wasn't a state until the 50s. At the end of the exercises, we got notice from Washington to be stationed at Pearl Harbor. So the fleet was not stationed in Long Beach or San Francisco, San Diego. It was based in Pearl Harbor. We had exercises every 10 days. We had 8 battleships out there, and half the battleships were at sea with the carriers, and half of them were in port. And we never came into port on a Monday until the rest of the half was out to sea, from April 1940 until Pearl Harbor. We knew something was going to happen. We mainly thought it was going to happen down around Truk, Japanese air base in the Western Pacific. In September of 1940, we went back to Bremen for overhaul 3 months, and I went home on leave for 2 weeks in Denver and my young sister's wedding, and came back and went back to Pearl Harbor, and of course didn't go back until January of 42. We exercised out and in. We knew the Japanese were going to come in sometime. We just didn't know when or where. In September 41, I took my examination for flight school, naval aviation pilot. I was third-class quartermaster on the Arizona, and most of the enlisted pilots that went to flight school from 1934 to 44 were from the aviation ratings. But B.J. Johnson, the gunner's mate third class on the Arizona, and on our football team too with me, he said, "Lou, let's go to flight school." I told him we couldn't go because of the right arm rates. Well, I had met a family in Honolulu, one of the old Camel families, and married to Harvey Hitchcock, and they had a daughter, and I danced with her a few days, and finally they took me in like a mother and father, and it was, thank God, they helped save my life forever. Because a sailor in those days were kind of wild on the streets, and it was hard to stay out of trouble. So I'd go to their house for dinner, and I had slacks and a Hawaiian shirt there, and my sailor uniform, and go in one of the closets, and I'd stay there. Well, it so happened in September 41, I was over there for dinner, and in walked Admiral Calhoun, who was commander of base force. And Harvey Hitchcock was vice president of Hawaiian Dredging and Honolulu Construction Company with the contracts for the Navy. And he asked me what I was doing, going to college or something. Remember that time, I was only 20 years old. And I told him, no, I was on the Arizona. He said, thank God. I told him about wanting to go to flight school with Johnny. He said, well, there's no law against right arm race going. It's just that you never put in for it. So he said, take your examination and have your writing officer send the request over to me, because I write the orders. And I said, fine. So as soon as I got back to Arizona, we went to sea in the third week in September of 41. And Lieutenant Ragsdale was our pilot. We had 3 planes aboard. SO-3Cs, biplanes, seaplanes, single engine. And he took us up for a flight. The first airplane flight I ever took was off catapult number 3 in the Arizona at sea in September 1941. And we shot off, went up 5,000 feet, did a lot of maneuvers, came back. They made a hard port turn, made a slick, put out the boom, and they have a 4-foot rope mat there, and we taxied up on it, and the pilot reached around and grabbed my belt as I stood up in the plane, took the hook and hooked it in, and they set us back on turret 3. That was our first airplane ride in the Navy. But the executive officer signed our request, and it went over to Base Force, and Admiral Calhoun wrote our orders. We got in the first week in November of 1941 to go to flight school as enlisted pilots. They took 30 a month at that time in the whole Navy, Atlantic and Pacific, to Pensacola. If you passed, you go into flight status. If not, you went back with your rate to the ship you were flying. So we made reservations early to go back to San Francisco, and second week in November of 41, and Captain Van called us down and said, Johnson, Conner, we're going back to December 19th to Long Beach to pick up our 1.1s, and so I'm not going to waste $5,000 in Navy money, so you can go from there to Pensacola. And in those days, he said, yes, sir, yeah. So we went to sea on November the 26th, and we were supposed to come in on December the 8th in the afternoon. The other half the fleet was supposed to go out. Well, on the 26th, we got ordered out to sea. We came back in, and we were ordered into port on the 5th of December, Friday, by Washington. And that's the reason all 8 battleships were in port, and the whole fleet was in port on the 7th. We had a meeting aboard the ship on the, we had Admiral Kidd, Isaac C. Kidd was our battleship commander of Division number 1. He was my first captain in 39 in the Arizona, and he went left and came back as commander of battleship Division number 1 as rear admiral. So we had a meeting on Saturday the 6th aboard the ship, and of course Sunday morning we were up at 8 o'clock, a quarter to 8 on duty, and at 5 minutes to 8 the first planes came across. Well, Franklin Roosevelt had sent a message to the commander of Asiatic Pacific in Manila to get a 50 or 100-foot boat and put a Navy lieutenant on it and the rest Philippine crew, and for them to go out in the middle of the Japanese fleet in the China Sea there and send dispatches back on their location. He knew that if they went in there as a man of war, they'd get sunk, and he would have an excuse to bring the Americans into the war in the Asiatic. On December the 4th, he also got a dispatch from Colonel Thorpe, which was the military attaché in Indonesia, that they'd sent a message east wind rain to the Japanese fleet, and that was the order for them to attack Pearl Harbor within 48 hours. They didn't forward this message that Thorpe sent them to Honolulu Admiral, General Short Admiral, didn't get the message till 2 o'clock in the afternoon on December 7th. Of course, you all know what happened on December 7th at 5 minutes to 8 in the morning. The planes came across, the Japanese had left northern Japan on the 26th of November and came across the northern Pacific. When they crossed the 180th meridian on December the 4th was an act of war because they have over 5-inch guns and nobody crossed the 180th meridian east or west without prior permission from the country involved. And they never asked permission to cross the 180th meridian. When they crossed over there with their battleship guns, the 12, 14-inch guns, and their carriers, it was an act of war. So we were at war really on the 4th of December. And they came in south of Alaska and turned south, came in 200 miles north of Pearl. And at that time we had the first radars in the world, the country after Britain, up on the hill there. And I knew some friend of mine was up there on it, in the Army Air Corps. And they called the watch officer over to Hickam and he said, don't worry about it, we've got to. They picked up a blimp on the radar and due north of a large squadron. And he said, don't worry about it, we have 12 B-17s coming in from Travis to be stationed here in Hickam and in Midway and so forth, so don't worry about it. Well, There was a Japanese fleet. They took off about 160 miles north of Pearl Harbor, and 200 and some planes came in on Kaneohe and across the hill and hit Pearl Harbor. We were all 8 battleships sitting there. Pennsylvania was in dry dock. California was in Fox 2. We were Fox 8. We had the Vestal outboard of us because we had little engineering work to do on the ship after we came in. The Nevada was astern of us. The West Virginia and Tennessee was ahead, and then the Oklahoma and Maryland. And of course, the Oklahoma took some torpedoes and bombs, and every one of the battleships took hits. We had hits forward and aft. Rick had gone forward we'd sent him forward to cut the lines of the vessel, and we'd pulled the gangplank into the deck, and we had a 15 or 1,600 pound armor parachute bomb from 10,000 feet go through the starboard side of the deck forward by number 2 turret, went through 5 decks into the lower handling room. The lower handling room stored all the ammunition for our 14-inch guns. They had 1 million pounds of powder there in the lower handling room. When that went through 5 decks and blew up, it blew up the forward magazine with 1 million pounds of powder. The Arizona came about 30, the bow came 30 to 40 feet out of the water and settled back down, but it was a fire from the mainmast forward. The guys were running out of the fire. Commander Fruch was our senior officer because Admiral Kidd and Captain Valkenburg had gone to the bridge, and of course when it blew up, it took everybody forward and the mainmast with them. And he told us to grab the guys coming out of the fire and lay them down on deck, even if you had to knock them unconscious, because they wanted to jump over the side because they were burning, and if you jumped over the side, they'd burn to death anyway. So we only got about 16, 18 of them laid down on deck, and we got them in the boats, and we were on for about 40 minutes on the ship burning. It was burning, and then we went into life boats and took them to the hospital. Ship came back and fought the fire until Tuesday night, and we got out and cooled down for 5 to 6 days, and then we dove on it. We had Pete Uzar was our main diver, water tender first class. He was a fullback on our football team, and we dove. He'd go down for 4 or 5 hours, and we went down all in the after part of the ship because we couldn't get forward to the mainmast. And we only brought out about 6 or 8 bodies because they'd be floating on the ceiling. We had to deflate them and pull them down to the hatch and shoot them up on the deck. So Commander Foucault said, cancel the rescue. It says it's too dangerous. You get your air hoses caught on the sides of the hatches and everything, so we quit. And after about 10 days of doing diving on it and everything, just before Christmas, I was transferred into base force because our executive officer, Commander Geisman, was made captain and made provost marshal for Honolulu. And he wanted people in there to take care of things. So Pete and I went in. After that, he called us in, and we rode a Jeep with a 30 caliber machine gun in the back of it and a 45 on our side. We put out the order that nobody was to be out after sunset or before sunrise and they get shot. And that order was on in Honolulu from December the 7th, 1941 until May of 1945. And it worked like a charm, and everybody knew we meant what we said, and they did what we said. If we told them to sit down and shut up, they sat down and shut up. And that's the way I think the police should run today. Anyway, you can say Pearl Harbor was only a 3.5, 4-hour war, or a 4-year war, a 3.5-year war. And so it was very short, hard, and fast. And I can read you a citation that I got from Captain Geiselman. Just last year, it was in my record. I didn't even know it was in there. In December the 5th, 6th was our first day after 30 days. We got to go ashore, and I went ashore to see Hester. I went to her family and had dinner that night, and Admiral Calhoun walked in. And he said, I thought I signed your orders for Pensacola. And I told him we lost him on the Arizona the 7th. And Johnny was on a destroyer at sea. And it wasn't 4 days that we were back in Honolulu, off duty, and on the Lurleen back to San Francisco. And on the way back, we had 1,200 to 1,400 women and children. Remember, some of the women and children got out there, but it wasn't a state, and it wasn't a permanent transfer station. They thought the Japanese were going to land there after the bombing. And of course, the Nevada was sunk, and all the ships were sunk. The Arizona was blown up. We blew up in 9 minutes, so we didn't have much time to go. But anyway, we came back, went to Pensacola. Last week in January 42, we got class. And November the 15th, 1942, we received our wings. I was a second-class quartermaster, and Johnny was second-class gunner's mate, and we had done our 300, we worked 7 days a week from January until November to get our wings, flying and everything. I was sent to San Diego, VP-11, Patrol Squadron 11. We were just about ready to go out, but VP-11 had been at Kaneohe, lost their planes, got new planes, went to Guadalcanal, came back in December of 42, and went into North Island and was put in VP-11 as a pilot. I was the first, second-class petty officer at the time. Of course, my skipper was Lieutenant Kennington. And we were held up 3 weeks while they painted all our planes black and all the numbers out and everything. We were the first Black Cat squadron that went south Pacific. We took off from there the first week of February for Kaneohe. We took off 5:30 in the afternoon, 19 and a half hours later we landed at Kaneohe. Those days there wasn't much radar or anything else. We flew the plane needle ball in airspeed. We were there a couple of weeks, went to Midway for a while, back and we were ordered to Perth, Australia, and then northwestern Australia, and rescues out of the Philippines, and then we were ordered back around to Port Moresby under Lieutenant General Kenny, who was the U.S. Air Force, Army Air Corps, in Port Moresby. And from there we did night dive bombing, night torpedo runs and everything up in New Guinea, New Britain and everything. And we got shot down in September and got the guys all together in a circle, held the hands, kept the treading water lightly, hit the nose, the shark ever came up close to you. And they got another lifeboat dropped to us in about 45 minutes. We went to New Guinea, hid in the jungle. I hid the guys in the jungle. We got out of there all that night and the next day, and the next night a PT boat came in and picked us up. We went back to our tender, debriefed, had dinner that night, breakfast the next morning. The next night at 5:30 we went out for 13 and a half more hours of the night bombing run in the Japanese fleet. There was no 6 months or 12 months. We stayed out. VP-11 was out for 22 months in combat in 43 and 44. Anyway, in December of 43, we were asked by General Kenny if we could help see what we could do about 219 Australian Coast Watchers, which were like our SEALs today. Our Green Berets, they were behind lines and sending us information. They were Japanese had sent a whole division of 15,000 men down to Wewak and sent 2,500 out at a time to find these guys in the different parts and cut their heads off. So 4 of us crews flew in 100 miles up the Secret River from Wewak, the Japanese quarter of a mile away on the north side of the river, landed in the river with crocodiles and logs, and in 3 days we pulled out 219 Australian Coast Watchers without a casualty. A couple of months ago, a girl called me from Sydney, Melbourne, and said, I'm the daughter of a Coast Watcher. My father is blind, he's 100 years old, he's in a rest home. He's not in very good shape. We wanted to talk to you. And my daughter has been in touch with her, talking to her since then, because none of them left except him. And I was one of the ones who was a pilot that helped bring them out in Secret River in northern Guinea, which is cannibalized country. You don't do anything. So anyway, I went on to television school, Norfolk, flew up with Admiral sent me up to Iceland to fly in the planes over the Russian fishing fleet. We go out over there and there were 16, 17 fishing boats out there, and you could tell 4 of them were not a fishing boat. They were all, the lines were coiled up perfectly. We went down over the lines. That was 1953. We went down, flew 50 feet off, made about 6 passes. I told the men if they made one shot, I'd sink them. But we took pictures, came back, gave it to the admiral, and he took it back to Washington. But it's silly for us to be spending money on whether Russians cut into our elections today or not. That was in 1953. They were cutting into our cable with divers to listen to what we were doing in the Defense Department. They've done that for years now. 2 years ago, we had 75 or 80 countries that we listened to the voting and everything, for God's sakes. So to keep it in intelligence doesn't have to go out to everybody in the world. Anyway, I was then transferred down to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, went through 5 months of school with Colonel Banks in the Special Forces School, which were mostly OSS at that time, coming out in the members. And all of my friends, Colonel Brucker and Norman, and just became good friends. When I got out of there, I was a SEER officer, survival, evasion, escape, resistance to interrogation, and espionage. I was the first SEER officer in the Navy, and for the next 15 years, I did nothing but train pilots and air crew. Anyway, I've been talking too long. I'm sorry, but I could go on. And thank you all for being here.
I want a copy of every speech.